Me, a bro.
Yep.
He, a dude.
That's good stuff. All right. Let's try it. Okay. Welcome to the We Will Journey podcast. We're talking about faith and life as it happens, and not the glossy exterior we wish it was.
Oh.
What, man? What did I do wrong?
I think you said it's because all the things I was thinking about before. But we can edit that. You got that part good.
Oh.
You got it good. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just...
Now it's your turn.
Good?
Yeah.
Wait. We're going to get under the surface. I should have said all those things before. We should have waited down and dirty until after we read this part.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty. Okay. Maybe we should. It doesn't have to be word for word, right?
No. I mean, I gave an interpretation.
Okay. All right. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty of life as it pertains to our beliefs, our relationships, politics, and absolutely everything else.
Oh, there we go. That was good. All right.
When I'm dead, laying in my coffin, all my friends all gather round. They can say I'm just sleeping good alone, the sweet peace I have found.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, I want to shift gears here a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to end it kind of at that point. And okay, so Scout, that kind of went down like that was like the details, right?
Yeah.
The proof is in the pudding, so to speak, there. So
Yeah.
but I want to zoom back out to this culture idea.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Right.
Okay. I gave the example at the onset of this that we kind of talked about the other day, is that the atheist, for example, things, maybe let's just take the golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's a biblical concept. Do unto others, as you would have them do unto you. I'm sure there's other principles, maybe not just biblical ones, but there's probably other similar, but we probably associate that kind of thinking with biblical thought in the Western world anyways.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of that because of culture that's going to rub off on somebody that doesn't even believe in the Christian God. Okay, so they're impacted by culture. They would see it in a negative way, right? Mm-hmm. Christians would view it in a positive way. But then when it comes to culture, the opposite is also true. So let's say I'm trying to be, a good Christian. I don't like that term, but let's just use that term for the sake of this conversation, a good Christian. There's going to be other aspects about the culture that are not good, that rub off on me simply because I live in that culture.
Right.
So can we talk about that just a little bit? Maybe you have some thoughts there. Maybe you don't have any thoughts there. I'm not really asking a question.
Yeah, it's not a
but
question.
It's not a question.
No.
I understand that it's not a question, but I'm trying to think about that. I'm trying to unpack that.
Yeah.
That piece of this whole thing, because I think that's like where that's the important piece to talk about.
Right.
Because that's the part that really gets to our embodiment. So that example that you gave before about Dante, having kind of a spiritual awakening of some kind, You know, like that doesn't always happen, right? We see a lot of people that they may be supposedly like a good Christian. Mm-hmm. You know, they may think of themselves as a good Christian, but there's all this stuff that they don't really see about themselves either. Yeah. Yeah. And that is just part of this cultural, probably pocketed upbringing that they've had and where they've lived most of their life. And I just think that's kind of like a fascinating aspect of this. So it works in both ways. So, and there would be like another aspect to this is, so does the culture save somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Who maybe doesn't even want to be saved? Is there some salvific aspect of culture where kind of the whole group is saved just kind of through culture? Or, because that's a biblical thought. Sure. That was the Jewish people, right? And then there were other cultures that were all kind of condemned because of their bad culture, right? So I'm just curious, does philosophy unpack some of that kind of thinking at all? Or is that kind of outside the scope of, is that too religious?
I don't know exactly, because it's hard to narrow down exactly what the question is.
I don't know. I don't know the specific question either. I'm thinking
it's so broad.
I'm thinking about it in very broad strokes there.
Well, of course, there's philosophers that have thoughts about culture. So, I mean, that's not. But I don't know if it's different from what you're saying. Well, maybe it's different in so far as we're saying, like, there are some aspects of culture that are good and some that are bad.
Right.
And maybe we want to develop a culture or a city, you know, that is just or something like that. Right. Then you're not talking about it in religious terms. Right. If you're talking about a culture that you want to be righteous.
Right.
That's more religious.
A
Utopia. Yeah, maybe utopia. Or something like that. Of course, philosophy and ancient Greek philosophy in particular, Plato and Socrates, I mean, the Republic is all about creating the just city and the question of what justice is. But they also had a concept of divinity.
Okay.
So they're not totally devoid of divinity.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, that is part of where the conversation goes.
Right. Well, I think
so if you're talking about culture sort of secularly, which is, I think, where this is going.
Well, it's both. It's probably both secular.
Well, because you're making a comparison to like a culture that is salvific, maybe if it is, versus culture that's secular,
right?
That doesn't do that, and then asking a question about philosophy, whether it addresses this as though there is also that division, which there might be, but it isn't so cut and dry,
right?
I think, I think we can look at both aspects,
right,
in different ways, and we can piece things apart. That doesn't mean that they're not connected.
Right. So from what you've read, then I think that was an interesting thought there on the utopia. Right. So as philosophers in the past have pondered this idea of utopia, like what are some of the things that come into play as they did that? How did they envision that? What did that look like?
Well, I guess I'm just going to speak in general and not particular philosophers. But I think one thing that people have thought is that we can reach utopia purely through reason, logic, and sort of technological sort of invention. Right. That we're able to solve the problems that we all suffer from. Maybe illness, sickness, and those kind of things. Poverty, right? Food shortage, all that stuff, by just advancing our technology, using science and reason And then at some point, then we'll reach a point where everybody has all the things that they need.
Yeah.
And is free of sickness and, is healthy.
Yeah.
And then we'd have this perfect society.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably what some people think. And there's definitely philosophers that have said that, or thought that. But I tend to lean towards some of, even with Plato and the Republic, what sort of comes out of that is that a utopia or a just city, in one example that they describe, is just sort of meeting the necessities of life. And that's a pretty simple life.
Right.
Right. And it actually sort of resembles like the community in Acts, where you're supposed to sort of form this community and you serve each other and provide for each other's needs and stuff. But that's a very small community and it's very simple, right? You don't get all sort of the luxuries. And that's where the problems start to happen in the Republic, is some of the people that are having this discussion are like, well, what about the pastries? Like, I don't want pastries, I don't want to just eat dates that we get from the trees, And what about the girls? Like the dancing girls. I want to see, the dancing girls and parties and drinking and, we want other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that I think speaks to human nature. And that even with this idea of technological advancement, and like maybe curing everything, that doesn't resolve the issue of human nature being something that isn't good.
Right.
And that there's this aspect of us that's not good.
Yeah.
And even if we lived in complete and total happiness, or we thought we could, there'd be people that wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
There'd be people that tried to disrupt that.
Right. I think it's interesting, too, when you were talking about Dante before, is that he was required to go into hell, so to speak, in order to go to heaven.
Yeah.
It's a biblical idea. It's a secular idea, but the idea of struggle and hardship plays into our maturation process. And that without those things, we never actually, like who we could be is never actualized. Because if we live this life of ease and comfort, and we're protected from all the bad stuff, then we actually never emotionally mature. Right?
Yeah.
Physically, we may be, happy and healthy, but emotionally, we're like totally deprived because we've never had to, be tested. Right? So the Bible talks about it like refined by fire. Like this refining process is hot and heavy. Like it's not fun. And so in that sense, this whole idea of utopia to begin with, I think is really flawed.
Yeah.
Like a utopia is destined to fail because it will produce people that lack maturation and wisdom. Yeah. Which is the end goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that suffering and, struggle are just ingrained in the nature of reality for human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. So then in that case, is culture kind of the necessary evil? Like the good and bad of any culture? Are those necessary ingredients anyways?
Yeah. Yeah, they're necessary, but I mean, you could also have a culture that could help you sort of navigate through those things better than others. Yeah. Because there's still going to be struggle no matter what. Right. Without any culture, because there are just inherent struggles that we have. Yeah. With our own families even. Right. So there could be cultures that are better adept at helping us get through those things. Right. Right. But then there can be cultures that just add more to the plate that we have to sort of sift through and figure out. Yeah. So let's just say American culture. Yeah. For example, then. Yeah. I mean, how do we stack up? Yeah, I don't think American culture is helping us to get through any of those things. Okay. Yeah. especially, American culture or sort of, especially pop culture.
Yeah.
The point that we're at in history now where we just live a life of ease and comfort from a lot of sort of the daily necessities we don't have to worry about.
Right.
And so we indulge in sort of excesses.
Right.
Right. We watch a lot of TV, watch reality TV or drama, and it's entertaining.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do anything for us or teach us anything. Or if it does, it teaches us something that's not great.
Right.
Right? Because you're just watching people fight over things, especially in those shows, reality TV.
Yeah.
That maybe ultimately don't have any meaning.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I think American culture sort of gives us more of an idea of like the meaninglessness of life than of sort of providing something that's meaningful.
Yeah. And then some of the stuff that I've listened to and read just talks about our happiness culture, where we have this the right to be not only just some of our basic needs met, but we have a right to also feel happy all the time. And that's kind of created this whole other thing that is relatively new, historically speaking, because there is so much affluence that now you have, all these groups that say, well, I want to just feel happy all the time. And if you impede my right to feel happy, then, you're committing some sort of violent act against me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have the right to pursue happiness. Or we have the freedom to pursue happiness.
Right.
In America, not just the right to be happy.
Right.
And first of all, I mean, we have to define what happiness is. Because if it's going to be different for every other person, there's going to be a lot of problems.
Right. Which I think is what we're kind of seeing.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing, because we have no definition terms, no agreement.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, a lot of the problems that we have come down to like language.
Yeah.
And lack of definition or lack of defining things. That's one thing. I mean, to go back to Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics, the one question is what happiness is, right? And I ask my students, like, what do they think happiness is? A lot of times they just give examples of what makes them happy.
Right.
Right. They say, well, spending time with my family and like, getting ahead in my career or, getting education or, doing this or doing that. And it's like, well, I'm not asking you what makes you happy. I'm asking what happiness is.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you get just basic answers like you can get scientific sort of biological answers. Well, happiness is, like a chemical reaction in your brain. And so it's a certain amount of that you have in your brain that, makes you feel happy. Well, then it's just a feeling. And are we looking for something that's just a feeling? I mean, is that what we think happiness is? Is that what you think happiness is? Is that what I think? I don't think happiness is just a feeling.
Yeah. Well,
because feelings are fleeting.
There again, there's like defining words.
Yeah.
Right? So is happiness different than joy? Or is happiness different than contentment?
Yeah.
Or, so I mean, there's a lot of different words that we may use to describe something kind of along the lines of happiness that we may define happiness just a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I mean, does happiness encompass that feeling? Right? Or can you be happy and not have that feeling? Can you be said to be happy? Like at the end of somebody's life, can you say they lived a happy life?
Yeah.
Right? And then did they have that chemical rush of happiness their entire life for that to be true? Right. No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
But then if it is just a feeling, and you're talking about these people who say, you can't infringe on my happiness, well, then that just leads to a lot of problems with, well, what if the thing that makes you happy and feel that rush is something that is bad?
Right.
Right? Like, I feel happy when I kill little kittens or something like that.
Right.
Should you stop me from doing that? Or is that infringing on my happiness? And that's the ultimate evil, right? Like, which one's worse?
Yeah.
It's not a question which one's worse. It's like, well, they just don't have the right conception of happiness. If happiness is just a feeling, yes, then it's all relative.
Yeah.
And you can't, there's no sort of high ground for you to say whether one thing's good or one thing's bad.
Yeah.
Right? Whether what you do is right and what they do is wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's just relative to you.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting about our culture in particular, which I think really has kind of given way to this place that we find ourselves in politically, is this idea of rugged individualism. Yeah. Right? So some cultures have a group narrative, right? So, it's hard to be an individual in some cultures because your identity is wrapped up in the group. So what's good for one is good for all. But in America, we have this very individualistic culture, right? Where I have the right to be me, and don't you dare, step on my toes in my process of doing that. Yeah. But I think what we're seeing though is that really gets difficult to maintain when we're trying to also be a collective. Yeah. Because when you have no real strong idea of what collective is, then all of this individualism starts to kind of storm, the castle, so to speak. Yeah. And now there is no collective identity at all, and there's only individual identities, and everybody wants what they want, and now I think we're seeing that, right? Just culturally and politically, there is no consensus on our group identity any longer, and it's causing all kinds of problems. Yeah. So we look politically, it's causing a stalemate. Nothing really gets done in government because nobody can get exactly what they want, and nobody can decide what is best for the whole either. Yeah. And so then you just sit and idle, and you're not going anywhere. Yeah. There was no question in that either, Scott. I know. Yeah. It was just a thought. Yeah. It was just a thought, and just kind of this idea that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I think too that you could say that even with this individuality that you're talking about, that in itself is too like a collective. Because you could see a lot of other countries that look at Americans and say, oh, those are the Americans. Right. That's how they are. Yeah. That's identifying a collective. Even if the collective is made up of everybody that's saying, oh, don't tread on me or whatever, I'm my own individual.
Get off my yard.
Yeah, get off my yard, right? Like, but that is a shared culture in a way. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because it's a shared sort of ideal or set of beliefs on like how life should be for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a hard thing to navigate, I think, right now. Because you can't maintain both, right? Yeah. It's that having your cake and eating it too. Yeah. Both can't exist. Yeah. Right? So how do you work that out? Yeah. What are the answers to that? Right. I don't know if there are good answers to that. Maybe there are. But those are really tedious and long, I think. Yeah. And maybe you can accomplish that. I don't have a lot of hope for that, I guess. I don't feel like we will. I think the most probable likely outcome is just the reset, right? Where something catastrophic happens and you just get reset down to a really low level where you have to work your way back up again. And now, instead of, some sexual fetish or material idea of happiness, now I'm just trying to get food and shelter again. Yeah. 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 So
yeah, I think you could probably go into places of the world where that's what they are worried about. and find that these are some of like the happiest people
right.
you could meet.
Yeah.
Because that's all they think about. And when they get food or they have shelter and everything, they're so thankful for it.
Right.
But they're not worried about like, or frustrated when they don't have cell phone coverage. Right? Like I can't watch my YouTube.
Yeah.
I can't listen to my music in the car. Oh my gosh, I'm going to kill somebody.
Right.
Right? Or this person just turned and didn't use their signal.
Yeah.
Like that just ruined my week.
Yeah.
Or my favorite football team lost. And so I'm in a bad mood all week.
Yeah.
Like those are trivial concerns.
Yeah.
That are a product sort of surplus and luxury.
Right.
From our society.
Yeah.
From our culture. That has placed value on those things.
Yeah.
And not value on the lesser things.
Right.
Which are more universal, really.
Mm-hmm.
Food and shelter.
Yeah. Yep. Tim Keller, in something that I read or listened to, said basically the gospel, I think he's being interviewed, has a tendency to go to seed in areas or cultures of affluence. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of sprout in more impoverished type areas of the world again. So the gospel, like where it really takes hold, it's always going to these areas where affluence is not part of it.
Right.
Yeah. Basic needs.
Yeah.
And that's where it seems to really thrive.
Yeah.
It dies in places like America. And I think we're seeing that right now. The true, I think, nature and sense of the gospel is dying. Mm-hmm. And other forms are sprouting in America. Mm-hmm. Right? Like really, really political forms of the gospel are coming to the surface. Like I've heard some statistics about people who say they're evangelicals, for instance, and they're basically just Republicans. They're conservative, gun-toting Republicans. I'm an evangelical. Do you go to church? No, but I'm an evangelical. Uh-huh. That's my group, Uh-huh. And so evangelical has come to mean something that it was never intended, to mean, but you were talking about words and definitions and meaning. Yeah. Those are fluid. Those change over time. And we're seeing that right now.
Yeah.
With a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Words are a community activity. Mm-hmm. Like, words are conventional.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But in being conventional, that means we have to have consensus on words to have any meaning, really.
Yeah.
Because if they all mean something different for everybody else, then they have no meaning.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is interesting stuff. It's part of just our collective brokenness. The Bible calls it sin nature. Mm-hmm. What does a philosopher, what did Dante call it? He probably ascribed more to Christian worldview, so he maybe called it sin nature too. What did Aristotle call it? Did he have a word for our brokenness?
No, but he said in a very quick little passage in the Ethics, something really interesting. He said there's something about human nature that tends towards bad.
Okay.
And that we can't account for, and that we can't sometimes change. And you're like, well, what is that?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Because
right.
It sounds kind of like original sin.
Yeah.
It's like there's this part of or aspect of us that no matter how good we are or how much we want to change it, it's like there.
Yeah.
Right? And we have to still sort of struggle to overcome it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I do find it interesting. Like, Yuval Noah Harari, and I know we've talked about it, that book, Homo Deus. Mm-hmm. He talks about it too, even though he's atheist. Mm-hmm. He talks about the fact that humans just have the tendency to screw things up. Mm-hmm. And so he does all this like prophetic science type stuff. This is kind of what it should look like. Mm-hmm. But we'll probably screw it up because we always do. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he defines it. He doesn't give it a term, but he just states that that's kind of how things go. And I think in his book, he really lost me when AI just destroys the humankind anyways. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, what's the point of any of this then? If AI just ends up destroying all of us and, it had no purpose or meaning. So I'm like, okay, pointless, but interesting read nonetheless. Yeah, so it is that part of it is, I guess, just kind of fascinating because everybody kind of has to come to terms with that, don't they? Regardless of your worldview, you have to come to terms with the fact that humans have a lot of, pretty deep flaws.
Yeah. Yeah, but some people, sort of live in fairy tale land. And
okay. You think some people just kind of pretend that doesn't exist?
Yeah. Especially when you live in your own little bubble.
Yeah.
And you, don't sort of expose yourself at all to that.
Right.
So, I mean, what I'm thinking of is somebody who thinks that, maybe is in denial that people can be evil, so they travel and they don't take any precautions or think anything ill of anybody.
Right.
Like, oh, these people might, come after me.
Yeah.
Like they might try and steal my stuff or kidnap me or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they think that somebody who does sort of have that instinct to think about it that way is crazy.
Right.
It's like, why do you think that about people?
Yeah.
It's like, well, because people are that way,
right.
And you should just be prepared, even if it doesn't happen.
Yeah. You made me think of, have you ever watched Documentary Now?
Yeah.
When they, is it like El Chapo or something? They're going down into Mexico trying to find El Chapo or whoever it is.
Yeah.
And all these reporters keep getting killed.
Yeah.
Because they're just so ignorant.
Yeah.
And they just keep walking right into gunfire and asking stupid questions and they just keep sending more people.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Right.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss.
Until you're dead. Until you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, it's been interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have some future discussions as we kind of continue down this path. Does philosophy dive into this spiritual realm of things much beyond Dante? Are there other philosophers that kind of take the deep dive into our consciousness or mind or spirit?
Yes and no, depending on who you ask.
Okay.
Because Dante wouldn't be considered a philosopher necessarily.
Okay.
But I don't know. The way I've done philosophy is very different than maybe what most people think of it.
Yeah.
Or the way they do it.
Yeah.
And so, and depending on the time, sort of during the Middle Ages, medieval philosophy, that was basically also theology. That was the same thing.
Yeah.
But some people would say that's not philosophy, that's theology.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a whole question of what's the difference between those.
Okay.
What's theology, what's philosophy.
So defining philosophy hasn't quite been accomplished yet either.
Right.
Still out there a little bit for some people.
For some people, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, human beings are complex. So it's not like there aren't philosophers, and there haven't been philosophers who... you can't just think that to do philosophy or to be a philosopher is to be completely secular.
Right. Well, that's a stumbling block for so many things, isn't it? Science or... Yeah,
science.
Whatever.
To believe in science doesn't mean you have to be secular.
People want to divide that up so much. It's either this or that.
Yeah.
It can't be both.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
but that's
nice and neat to compartmentalize things.
Yet nobody's like that.
Nobody is. Yeah.
We can't actually live out that idea.
Right.
Because we're not just one thing.
Yeah. We do that with people too.
Yeah.
Politically even.
Right.
Oh,
exactly.
They're a liberal.
Right.
Yeah. But then you talk to them and we actually share similar beliefs about things.
Yeah.
Because it's another human being.
Yeah.
It's complex. They're not just... this one thing that you sort of label them as.
Yeah, we try to minimize who they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And dehumanize them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had talked about that before.
Yeah.
How labeling does that.
Yeah.
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 And we're getting to a point where we do that more and more.
We've done a ton of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ushered in
and it creates problems.
Yeah, ushered in by a few people specifically, and I won't say their names, but it seems like in my late teens, early 20s, like that was really shifting in the United States, where we were drawing some very clear lines, and there were a few people kind of doing a lot of the talking heads around those movements. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're either on this side or that side.
Yeah.
There's no
together anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is scary stuff.
Yeah.
That's really scary. And we're seeing the fruit of that right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because those lines have now been clearly drawn. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. And so now what happens? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, my hope is that's where Christianity could come in and say, hey, we're all God's creatures, right? Now, I know Christians that would immediately follow that up with, yes, but,
Those people are horrible.
There's your people going to hell, and there's your people going to heaven, and let's make sure we draw that line. And I'm like, no, I don't know about that. You know, like,
who decides that? You?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they decide that.
Right.
Yeah, they make that decision really quick.
Yeah, who's the person that says that one's going to hell?
Yeah.
That one's going to heaven?
Yeah. So, those things are just very complex, like you said, and they're hard to navigate. But I think it's worth a try, though. Mm-hmm. I definitely think it's worth trying. God felt it was worth his effort, so he didn't just leave us to kind of squander in our own filth. He came down and did something. He intervened, and so maybe it's worth us giving it a shot too with his help. But all right, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having.
Thank you very much,
podcast.
And we'll look forward to our listenership skyrocketing. After this,
right?
Yeah. So, I'll share those big numbers with you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Happen. All right, man.